So without further ado, we'll get started here. We'll start with the first slide here, history of diesel. So I just want to start out, give a little groundwork of where diesel comes from. So 1900s, Rudolf Diesel invented the diesel engine, put it out. Basically for about 20 years ran on vegetable oil. Now this wasn't biodiesel, but it was a vegetable oil that it ran on, typically peanut oil. In the 1920s, some advances in the distillation process really kicked over the advent of the diesel engine. A lot more power, a lot more BTUs, things like that. So for 73 years, they ran on high sulfur diesel, which was basically unregulated, upwards of, could be as high as 5,000 parts per million of sulfur in that fuel. Ran on until about 1993 when we kicked over to low sulfur diesel, which dropped that number down to 500 parts per million. And then 1998, biodiesel really came on as a commercially available, I guess in commercial quantities, available product that could be used as well. And then in 2006 was the biggest change yet, and that's where we see our fuel today as ultra low sulfur diesel, which is down to 15 parts per million. And we'll talk a little bit about going forward here on what that really meant for our fuel and our engines. To give you a little overview about our demand for crude in the United States, typically we refine or process about 750 million gallons of crude oil every day. And how that breaks down to diesel fuel, what that means for us, diesel users, we got about 150 million gallons approximately of diesel fuel a day, which comes out to be about 55 billion gallons, 55 to 60 billion gallons of diesel fuel used in the United States every year. Right now it's about 150 U.S. refineries, different capacities, but basically all of them are running at about 90+% capacity. So what is biodiesel? Biodiesel, defined, it's a fuel. We want to say that first. It is a fuel. It's not just a vegetable oil, but it is a fuel. And it's comprised of monoalkyl esters, long-chain fatty acid derived from vegetable oils, animal fats designated as B100 and meeting the ASTM 6751 requirement. So it's not just a vegetable oil you're going to get from your Friday night fish fry and strain it out and put it in your car and think it's a fuel. It's not. Biodiesel is a fuel. Once you take that vegetable oil, put it through a process called transesterification, that makes it into a fuel called biodiesel. The second one there, biodiesel blend, that's something maybe a little more familiar with. You might hear people refer to different blends as B2 or B5. Basically what that means is that they're using a percentage of biodiesel blended with petroleum-based diesel fuel. So there's going to be, you hear B5 a lot, B10, B20. I know our friends in Illinois there are using a lot of B11. There's some different advantages tax advantages for them over there. So you hear B11 over there, which is basically 11% biodiesel. Blended with 89% petroleum-based diesel. Minnesota has a currently state mandate that is 5% biodiesel, and so they use 5% biodiesel, 95% petroleum-based diesel. So what is biodiesel mostly made from? The feedstocks, the marketing year 2013, soybean oil was the #1 feedstock used to make biodiesel. Corn oil is a growing percentage. With a lot of different advancements, I guess, in using the oil from the ethanol manufacturing process. They can take that corn oil and make biodiesel from it, so that is an up-and-comer. And of the soybean oil, over half of it was, biodiesel, over half of it was made from soybean oil, so how much was produced in 2013? You can see that green number down there at the bottom. It was about 1.8 billion gallons of biodiesel produced in 2013, up a little bit from 2012. Our mandated gallons based on the Renewable Fuel Standard 2, the RFS2, was 1.28 billion gallons in 2013, and 1.8 was produced, and people are really starting to see the advantages, whether it be mechanical or economical, for using biodiesel. The biodiesel attributes, why you want to use it. High cetane number already. It's got an average of over 50. We've seen a lot of biodiesel sometimes over 60. You got ultra low sulfur diesel already, less than 2 parts per million on average. High lubricity, which we'll touch on again, which is very critical. So when we went to ultra low sulfur diesel down to 15 parts per million of sulfur, the fuel lost a lot of lubricity. All right, sulfur by itself is a little bit of a natural lubricating compound, but also the process at the refinery level where they remove the sulfur from the fuel really makes that fuel a drier, less lubricity in that fuel. So even at blends as low as 1 to 2%, you're still going to see quite a bit of gain in lubricity in your fuel. High energy balance, 5.5 to 1. Low ag inputs such as soybeans. 78% life cycle CO2 reduction. Renewable, sustainable. the big one. When you domestically produce, those are two big ones, two big attributes of biodiesel that really helps promote national energy security. We can grow it here, we can make it here, we can use it here. Also, it reduces semi-vital hydrocarbons, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide, which is another great attribute. Cleaner burning than its petroleum-based counterpart. So some ASTM standards. This one might be a little bit more interesting to you too. So in 2008, the inclusion of B5 into the D975 specification for number 2 diesel fuel. That's kind of a big deal, just for the fact that the D975 is the ASTM standard for number 2 diesel fuel, and in 2008 they decided that adding 5% biodiesel to that, so having a B5 still counts. It still is just considered number 2 diesel fuel. Anything B5 and less, so B2 and B5. When you go and fill up at different stations, you might not see anything that says this contains biodiesel blend because B2 and B5 are just considered straight number 2 diesel fuel. It also included the B5 into the D396 specifications for heating oil, which is also kind of a big deal because they have a nice product called BioHeat out there that is used for home heating oil. I think you can use biodiesel as well. Then they had another category of fuel, passage of the blended fuel spec for B6 to B20. Now this is where you will see some labels at the pump. We'll start seeing some of these in the state of Minnesota here coming up this summer when we go to our B10. Throughout the summer, we'll start seeing some stickers, some labels on the pump that say biodiesel blend contains between B5 and B10, or excuse me, B5 and 20% biodiesel. Illinois will already see those stickers, and throughout other states in the Midwest or throughout the country really, you'll see some stickers here and there that some labels that say this does contain a biodiesel blend, and that's why those labels are on there. If it contains higher than 5%, basically, B6 to B20. And then they added an addition of the 6751, or to the 6751, a cold soak filtration test to eliminate cold filter plugging potential. All this is moving forward, and that's a big reason why the used diesel vehicle market is growing. Now there's over 44 new clean diesel cars and trucks and SUV models out for 2014. Also, the automotive industry experts predict that more than 58 models, there will be more than 58 models to choose from by 2017, which is quite a jump from even just a few years ago where you basically had your Volkswagens, Mercedes, BMW, some of those cars to choose from, and then obviously the big trucks. But you're seeing a lot more sedans now coming out in the diesel and the clean diesel. And industry experts believe that diesel vehicles will make up 10 to 15% of the U.S. market by 2025. With this growing market, the potential demand for biodiesel in the U.S., what is that? Well, it can't really be measured as, it has to be measured as a realistic blend. It can't just be taken that since we use 55 to 60 billion gallons of diesel fuel a day, or excuse me, in a year, that we're going to use that much biodiesel. The demand for biodiesel really needs to be a realistic blend. B2 and B5 are very realistic, as we noticed in a couple slides before that they're just considered in the number 2 diesel fuel spec. But a potential right up to B20. We do promote a lot of B20 usage in the summertime, especially in Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. All those states can really use B20 all throughout the summer and have a very good luck with that. That B20 actually, if you're using like a premium diesel, it really enhances the premium diesel. It helps with lubricity, increases all that stuff, helps with detergent. It's really a great thing to be using in the summertime, especially if you're using a premium diesel. If every trucker in the U.S. used B2, that industry alone would utilize 761 million gallons of B100 every year. That's another big user. We're just trying to find the big users out there that can really help push gallons through. Why blend biodiesel into ultra-low sulfur diesel? There's a lot of different alternative fuels, they'll call them, out there, and I think biodiesel is one of the best ones, just because it's already, the first one there, it's already compatible with everything you have. So if there's a school system or a school district that wants to start using biodiesel so they can have cleaner burning fuel, maybe lower the cost a little bit of their fuel, it's a great opportunity to use it. There's no infrastructure that needs to be put in. They can just start using it. They can call up the fuel distributor and say, I want you know, a B20 or a B10 or whatever it is, the next delivery, and they can bring it in and start using it. Compatible with all the engine, with all 2007 diesel engine catalysts, talking about the DPFs right there. Reduces harmful emissions, which again is one of the best attributes of biodiesel, cleaner burning. Power and performance are virtually unchanged. We get that question a lot because a lot of people are concerned about using a different type of fuel that's not petroleum based if you're going to lose a lot of power. And even at a B20, you're going to see less than a 1% drop in mileage. There's no issue there. Seamless and transparent, like I said, with existing petroleum infrastructure. It can be used with everything you have right now. All the current up to a B20 blend, you can use all your current hoses and gaskets and all that sort of stuff. Should be no issue there. Promotes national energy security, renewable, non-toxic, and greatly enhances lubricity of ultra-low sulfur diesel. And I've mentioned this a couple times, and we'll get to this next slide here that talks about ultra-low sulfur diesel and lubricity. So when the sulfur compounds, they are a natural lubricant. When they were removed from the fuel actually did lose a lot of lubricity. Because of that, the ASTM standard was put into effect in 2005 for diesel fuels. It's ASTM B6079, and that's basically measures the amount of wear on critical engine parts. So the wear scar maximum is 520 micrometers. So the next graph you'll see here, that just using ultra-low sulfur diesel, 520. Premium diesel, which typically might have some maybe lubricity package in there, might get down to about 460. We talked about before, 1 to 2% biodiesel can give you great lubricity. You can see at 2% biodiesel or a V2 blend, you can get down to 250. So you're overcutting that number over in half at 520. And then B5 down to 220, and then the higher you go, obviously you see some better results in the lubricity. I do want to touch on the cold flow properties a little bit. This is one thing that we hear a lot about, especially when we go to different, might go to some different farm shows and talk to farmers and see how much they love biodiesel, but it's just too bad you can't use it in the winter, and it's simply not true. You know, there's northern states that use a lot of biodiesel all year. You know, Minnesota has a great opportunity to showcase one of their cities, International Falls, which is known as the icebox of the nation. You know, they're using B5 year-round with no issues up there. So try to dispel some of these myths here. First, you got to talk about two things that we'll talk about a little bit in this next: is cloud point and CFPP, which is the cold filter plugging point of a fuel. The cloud point is the temperature at which the first wax crystals start to form and are visible to the naked eye. Diesel fuel itself does have paraffin in it. It's a natural occurring, you know, substance that's in diesel fuel, so that will start to occur when it gets to a cold temperature. When it gets to a temperature, it'll start to form, and then it'll drop out to the bottom to separate. So the cold filter plugging point is the temperature. Basically, the CFPP is the temperature at which a standard set of test conditions in which the filter plugs. So basically, that's when you're getting that paraffin wax dropping out and getting pulled through your fuel line and getting stuck and plugged in a filter and restricting fuel flow to the fact that you're losing power and eventually maybe shutting the engine down. So here's just some properties of ultra-low sulfur diesel, B5, B10, and B20. This is how you can kind of see with your own eyes here without even really, if you don't really want to know what the numbers mean, all those numbers mean, you can just look at them and see ultra-low sulfur diesel and B5 especially are just very, very similar in all these test results. If you go down to the bottom there, cloud point and CFPP, you got about 1 degree difference in using a B5 and about 2 degrees difference in cold filter plugging point. Then you go up to B10, a little bit more of a difference. B20 obviously is a little bit more, quite a drastic difference there in cloud point and CFPP compared to ultra low sulfur diesel itself. So just some CFPP testing, ultra low sulfur bio blends. This is some testing we did, and again, the base fuel is always it's always your number you're going to want to base everything off of. So if someone says that they have an additive that can get you to, you know, minus something, you always want to know what base fuel they're talking about, because it's kind of, it does run linear with what the base fuel is. So this base fuel, ultra low sulfur diesel, had a base cloud point of -2, and a CFPP with additive of -22. So you add, you know, go to B2, identical. B5, there's that 1 degree difference again in the cloud point, and about a 4 degree difference in CFPP. Then you get down to that B11, which we put that in there for our Illinois friends there, and see a little bit bigger of a difference there. But the B2, B5, you can see there's only about a 1 degree, either virtually unchanged or a 1 degree difference in those test results. So some troubleshooting checklists that we like to always talk about when this is regarding filter plugging. So microbial growth. Now, one of the big things when they removed the sulfur from the fuel, so when we went down to 15 parts per million to ultra low sulfur diesel, obviously lubricity, we had talked about that. That has been lost in the fuel, but also microbial protection. So people call it microbial growth. They can call it fungus or bacteria, bugs, whatever you want to call it. So microbial growth. So the sulfur that was in the fuel actually acted as kind of a natural biocide. It really kept all that microbial growth at bay. So when they removed that, when we removed the sulfur from the fuel, if there is any water in the fuel tank, if any free water in the bottom, right where that water and that fuel interface comes together, right where the interface, you can get a lot of microbial growth, because microbial grows using oxygen to breathe from the water that's in there, and it uses the hydrocarbon that's part of the petroleum product in there for its food, and basically, and it can just keep growing that way. So one of the myths out there is that biodiesel actually causes greater microbial growth, which actually is not true. As long as you can keep your fuel tanks clean, keep them free of water, you should have very low susceptibility to microbial growth. Icing of the filter. This again comes from excess water in the tank. It could come from two things actually. It could come from excess water in the tank where the water is just getting pulled up into a filter and it's saturated in the filter, and on cold days, talking about especially dispenser filters where they're exposed maybe, you can get some icing of the filter where the filter water on the filter just freezes in the cold temperatures, and you're unable to pull fuel through there. One of the other things we can see happening sometimes is when you use water separating filters and biodiesel. So if you have a B5, B10, B20 blend, I'm using a water separating filter, and the water separating filter maybe isn't taken care of as often as it needs to be, drained as often as it needs to be, it can become saturated with water, and the glycerin in the biodiesel will be attracted to that water and collect up on those pleats. And eventually, no matter if you're using a B2, it would take a little longer, B5, B10, B20, the higher blend you use, the faster that filter will plug up. So that's something else we have seen with excess water in the tank and biodiesel blends and things like that. Oxidation is one of the bigger filter plugging issues we've seen recently. Basically, that's black filter, and it is caused by hot fuel returns. So the fuel that goes into the engine is partially combusted, comes back into the fuel tank, hot fuel return back in the fuel tank, and it can really break down that fuel that's in there and cause it to become almost a darker color. You can almost see if it's a darker color just by looking at it with the naked eye. But then that fuel comes back through the filter, and that filter will go ahead and filter out those black kind of particulate matter that's in there, and eventually clog up that filter, restricting the fuel flow to the engine. The fourth one down there, monoglyceride buildup. Now this can be, like I mentioned about the water separating filters, where it has a saturated filter, but also it could be from off-spec of total and free glycerin in the biodiesel portion of the fuel that you're using. These are few and far between, to be honest. We have not seen a lot of these. Actually, kind of very, very few. But this is something that could happen. This is kind of the biodiesel related one that you're going to see for filter plugging, is the monoglyceride buildup. The last one there, paraffin wax. That's what we talked about, the cold filter plugging point. I guess when your fuel gets cold enough and the wax can drop out, if you have nothing in that fuel in the wintertime to suspend those wax crystals and keep them from getting together and dropping out and plugging up the filter, you'll be able to see that happen. The paraffin wax will come in and clog up that filter. A good way to know if it's paraffin wax is if you take the filter out and warm it up. Paraffin should melt about 65 to 68 degrees, right around there. Should actually all melt off. So we actually had filters sent into us this winter that people had filter plugging issues, and they'd send the filters down, and they might sit in our lab for an hour or two and warm up, and then all that wax would melt off, and there'd be nothing wrong with the filters. Would all look clean. So this is a good way to know, a good way to check paraffin wax. And paraffin wax and monoglyceride do look similar. but monoglyceride buildup also needs about 200 degrees Fahrenheit to melt off. So paraffin wax melts off to room temperature, so you'll know what it is. Splash blending, top loading trucks. We have quite a few people these days are getting into purchasing perhaps B99 or B100 directly from a producer or from a broker or something like that. They can get their B100, they can store it, and they can bring a transport load of number 2 diesel fuel in next to it, and they can splash blend and make their own biodiesel blend, and they can blend whatever they want. They can blend 2%, 5%, 10, 20, whatever the customer that they're bringing it to would like. But a couple things to know about that. First of all, if you do top load, diesel fuel always goes in first. Biodiesel always goes in second on top. But it's also important to know what the cloud points of the fuel are. So it's important that the B100 and the diesel fuel are both 15 degrees above the cloud point while blending takes place. We had some instances this winter even when you get number 2 and number 1 diesel fuel even, where the number 2 diesel fuel is in the storage tank and it is at or right around its cloud point. And cold weather is on its way, so someone goes and puts a bunch of number 1 in on top, and it won't blend, it won't mix. That number 1 will just sit there on top, and you still have some filter plugging issues coming because you'll just be running number 2 when it's cold out. So it's important that to know the cloud points of the fuel. Just make sure that they're well above their cloud, or enough above their cloud points that they actually will mix. Then agitation during transport and delivery will provide further blending, so you don't have to worry about that too much. A lot of people are worried about it, but that's one of those things where top load it and driving around and then loading it back in, or loading it into the customer's tank. That should provide enough agitation that it will get some good blending. I just want to talk a little bit more about some housekeeping and some tank maintenance stuff. Check tanks for water and sediment. You can eliminate a lot of issues, whether it's biodiesel related or just diesel fuel related. You can eliminate a lot of issues by making sure there's no water or sediment in your fuel tank, in your storage tank. If you are thinking about going to a biodiesel blend and you have never used one before, it's always a good idea to go ahead and get a bottom sample of that tank. There's equipment out there, tank bombs or bacon bombs they're called sometimes, where you can get a tank bottom sample, so you can really see. That's gonna be the worst part of your fuel down there, so you can really see what's down there. If everything looks clean and good, then you can start using a blend right away. But if there's free water down there, you want to get that taken care of before you have any biodiesel being really delivered to your facility there. Always install a dispenser filter. We typically recommend a 30 micron filter. Year round, in the summertime, you can go a little tighter if you want to, but in the wintertime especially, we recommend a 30 micron filter on the dispenser, just because if a 30 micron filter, when the fuel, if you look at the above ground storage tank and the fuel is at its cloud point, it could, the viscosity of the fuel could be a little higher. It could be hard to get through there. Hard to pump anything if it's a 10 micron filter, for instance. You're going to have a difficult time pumping that. So we always recommend a 30 micron, just your standard paper plate 30 micron filter. It also keeps bigger, larger contaminants from reaching your vehicles. On your vehicle, you're going to go through a series of filters as well. You can keep filtering things out along the line. Storing a fuel in a clean, dry, dark environment, it's always good, and also limited headspace. We'll talk about those two at the same time. It's always a good thing to do. You don't want to have a storage tank right in the middle, right in the sun, where it's getting all, the sun's heating it up all day, and then as it cools at night, you have headspace in that tank. We all know moisture, air can hold a lot of moisture in it. It heats up that tank, and then it gets cold, and condensation can occur, and that's how you can get some water in the bottom of your tank and have some issues down the line. If you are going to buy biodiesel, we always recommend, obviously, that the biodiesel meets the ASTM D6751 standard. You can get that. Make sure you can always get a C of A from your distributor or from the provider of the biodiesel. Always keep a retained sample from each load and receive. This is always a good idea in case somebody has an issue somewhere along the line. You can come back and test that fuel and make sure that it does in fact meet all the specifications, and that the fuel had nothing to do with any issues somebody might have had. Using a biodiesel blend, it always is nice to buy it pre-blended, especially if you have a smaller tank. If you're buying 1,000 or 2,000 gallons or something like that at a time, it's always good to buy it pre-blended. And if you have a water separating filter, Like I said, they do work. They do what they're supposed to do. They just be very aware that you do need to check it every day. Check for indication, drain it. Just keep track of it. Simple preventative maintenance stuff. In the bottom there, monitor hoses, fill vapor caps and gaskets, things like that. Again, that's all basically going to be your preventative maintenance. Things you're going to do anyway. So, one thing I'll tell you about fuel in general and testing fuel is that a lot of people do their preventative maintenance and all their equipment religiously, but they won't. But for some reason, they neglect the actual fuel that's powering that equipment. So, a little bit of testing here and there, once or twice a year. You can always test in the fall, make sure you're good to go for the winter. Test again in the spring, make sure everything's good for the summer. Two simple tests like that can save you a lot of money down the road and a lot of headaches and expense. So I do tend to talk fast, and I rip through those pretty quick. I know that, and that's actually all I have today.